packed to the brim. And they had a little fellowship meal after the funeral, and everybody stayed for that, and there's just so many people there. And the funeral was actually the longest funeral I've ever been to. I vowed since then I'm never going to preach a funeral like that. But everybody stayed and listened to all these things that people had to say. And I just kind of wonder in those regards, what was said about Samuel. Now, I know Samuel was not the best at everything. He had some definite faults. But I think by and large, when you look at Samuel, you have a pretty good feeling about what he did, right? He held to the Word of God, and he held to really what the people ended up wanting. They wanted a king. And he held up his end of the bargain, which is really following what God said, go ahead and give him a king. Go ahead, we'll do this together. We're going to give them a king, and I'll show them what a king's going to be like. And then, of course, we've been talking about how awful Saul has been this whole time, right? He has one moment where you go, oh, he might turn out to be pretty good. But knowing the rest of the story, he does not. Even recently, in the last chapter, we'll bring this up whenever I get back, but the last chapter that we discussed, Saul, it seems like he's got a little bit of a penitent heart, but if you read ahead, you realize that does not last long. Saul is just not a good guy. He's not a good king. He's not a good person in general, and so he's got a lot of problems. Well, thinking back to Samuel, he realizes all this stuff. He's just following through with what God says. God says, here's the warnings that you're going to have with a king. And what does Saul do? Saul fulfills all those warnings. Saul just, proves God right. And so anyway, we have Samuel's death. And it says that all Israel gathered themselves together and they lamented him. They mourned him. You think about some people that have died in this country, and we mourn them. We mourn them. You might even, if you think back to some presidents that have died in relative recent years, and you think, people lament them, but not everybody laments them, right? But all Israel laments that Samuel is gone. But this is kind of an interesting thing because Samuel is their connection to God, almost a direct connection. And now that Samuel is no longer there, there's a little bit of despair. It'd kind of be like, if you will, this, not the same exact thing, but what if woke up in the morning and all of our Bibles in the entire world had been stolen? That would be a pretty precious thing. I mean, what would we do when we get together on Sunday and Wednesday? What would we do? We'd start, we'd go as much as we could on memory, but, that book is pretty precious, right? It is our direct link to God. And, I think about what's going on with the people there. They're lamenting that Samuel is gone. All right, let's look at verses 2 through 8. This sermon really is not really about Samuel, but I want to spend a little bit of time talking about Samuel because really, if you look at the title of this lesson, it is Nabal, a churlish and evil man. And we get one verse for Samuel, and we get pretty much the rest with Nabal. All right, let's look at this. Verses 2 through 8. Nabal, this is a churlish, evil man. And there was a man in Maon whose possessions were in Carmel, and the man was very great, and he had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats, and he was shearing his sheep in Carmel. Now the name of the man was Nabal, and the name of his wife Abigail, and the woman was of good understanding and of a beautiful countenance, but the man was churlish and evil in his doings, and he was of the house of Caleb. Now, I'm going to mention this, and I don't know. I'm going to have to study Hebrew because I only know enough to get myself in trouble. And I was looking up some stuff here, and somebody made this mention, and I really just don't know what the validity is of this. I couldn't find anybody else that really said this, but it makes sense. Now, I don't know. Like I said, I don't know validity here, so just take it as you will. But the thought process is that the idea of him being a Calebite, that is really what the word looks like. But somebody said that this is probably a misunderstanding in transcription, and that it should have been as he was as his heart. He was as his heart. Now, why is that important? Well, we're going to find out later on that Abigail even calls Nabal and says he is what his name means. Now, do you know what his name means? His name means fool. Now, I don't know how you earned that name, or I don't know if maybe you're named that as a child. I don't know what happened here, but Nabal ends up living up to his name. All right, verse 4, and David heard in the wilderness that Nabal was shearing his sheep. And David sent 10 young men, and David said unto the young men, get you up to Carmel, and go to Nabal, and greet him in my name. And thus shall ye say to him that liveth in prosperity, peace be unto thee, and peace be to thy house, and peace be unto all that thou hast. And now I have heard that thou hast shearers, thy shepherds have now been with us, and we did them no hurt. Neither was there aught missing unto them, all the while they were in Carmel. Ask thy young men, and they will tell thee. Wherefore, let the young men find favor in thine eyes, for we come in a good day. Give, I pray thee, whatsoever cometh to thy hand unto thy servants and to thy son David. And so, what is David doing? He sends his servants to Nabal and says, look, we have done really a good service for you. We have protected your shepherds while they've been out in the field. We've not taken from them. We've protected them. And so, he's just asking for a little bit in return. Of course, you got to remember that David is not yet got his hands on the king's treasury. While he might as well, he is the Lord's anointed now at this point. He does not have instant income coming in. He doesn't have anything. And so he is relying on people around him and trying to do some things. So he basically ends up in advance running security for Nabal, and then coming back and saying, hey, could you help us out here? Well, we've been protecting your investments, and can you give us whatever you want to give us? Whatever you want to give us is fine. And that's the thing. He doesn't ask for anything in particular, just says whatever you can give us from your hand, we would appreciate. So verses 9 through 13. This is Nabal offends David. Look at what happens. And when David's young men came, they spake to Nabal according to all those words in the name of David, and ceased. And Nabal answered David's servants and said, who is David? And who is the son of Jesse? There are many servants nowadays that break away every man from his master. Okay, so stop right there. Who is David? Let me ask you a question. Do you think that this is a legitimate question? This is not a legitimate question. This is an arrogant question. Who is David? Who is the son of Jesse? Who? I don't know this. I don't really know this. Reminds me of whenever I was. I don't know if I should even tell this, but whenever I was a security guard in a school, I was a security guard for the school, and when I was out there one day, and I was riding by, and somebody had just rudely parked in the handicap spot. And I thought, well, that's kind of rude. And I waited a little bit, and they didn't move it. And so I wrote them a ticket, and I put it on their car. And then about an hour later, this guy comes huffing and puffing at me. And he said, did you write this ticket? And I said, I don't know. Let me see. And sure enough, my name's on it. And it described where he had parked and all that. And I said, oh, yeah, that was me. And he goes, do you know who I am? And I said, no. Do you know who I am? And he said, no. And I said, well, have a good day. And I got a call from my boss and said, you just did that to the dean of the law school. And I said, well, I don't know, but it seems to me that maybe the dean of the law school might understand rules. I don't know. I didn't go to law school, by the way. I don't know. And that probably is a good thing. But anyway, this is what he does. He goes, I don't know who David is. Almost in the same kind of vein, do you know who I am? No? Well, I don't know who David is. I don't know who's the son of Jesse. Who knows? Almost as if, who cares? Who cares who this is? And so Nabal says, I don't know who the son of Jesse is. Now, listen, you would have to be living under a rock to not know who David is at this point. What has David done? David killed Goliath. Everybody knew it. Everybody knows the name of David. I mean, of course, you remember all the songs they sang about David. If you don't know who David is, you don't know anybody at this point. And so there's just no way he doesn't know. Well, he says, oh, you know what? I don't know David. I don't know the son of Jesse. I don't know who this is. And then he says this. He goes, you know, there's a lot of servants that run away from their masters. So I mean, you know, that's just kind of a thing. I don't know anybody's little servant that's running off. And so verse 11, shall I take my bread and my water and my flesh that I've killed for my shears, and give it unto men of whom I know not whence they are? So I don't know where you come from, people. And why am I going to give all the things that I have, the things that are mine, that I've done for myself, for the people that work for me? Why would I give that to anybody else? So verse 12, so David's young men turned on their way and went back and came and told him according to all these words. And David said unto his men, gird ye on every man his sword. And they girded on every man his sword, and David also girded on his sword. And there went up after David about 400 men, and 200 abode by the baggage. So, you know, what happens? Of course, this is an affront to David. And so David rises up. And now if you look at what's going on, and if you're honest, now people will in commentaries try to justify these actions. There is no justification for this. David gets his feelings hurt, and he decides, let's just go kill them all. And nobody likes to think about that, but that's exactly what he does. David is not a perfect man. You know, he gets upset just like everybody else. And we can actually prove later on in this passage that what he is about to do is absolutely wrong. He just gets offended, and then he is about to go and kill people unnecessarily. All right, let's look at verses 14 through 22. Abigail is going to intercede here. So, but one of the young men told Abigail, Nabal's wife, saying, behold, David sent messengers out of the wilderness to salute our master, and he railed at them. But the men were very good unto us, and we were not hurt, neither missed we anything, as long as we went with them when we were in the fields. They were a wall unto us by both day and by night, all the while we were with them keeping the sheep. Now therefore know and consider what thou wilt do, for evil is determined against our master and against all his house, for he is such a worthless fellow that one cannot speak to him. Now this is a servant speaking to the wife of his master, and what does he say about his own master? This is showing you exactly what kind of a man he is. Everybody knows it. Everybody knows it. Because he is able to say this, and nobody says a word. Everybody just, Abigail knows what he's doing. You know, everybody understands this. And so he says, he is just such a worthless fellow that nobody can even speak to him. Now, I hope that can't be said of anybody here, but I do know that people like that do exist. And so he is just a worthless fellow. Sorry, I'm lost my place here. Okay, verse 18. Then Abigail made haste and took 200 loaves and 2 bottles of wine and 5 sheep ready dressed and 5 measures of parched grain and 100 clusters of raisins and 200 cakes of figs, and laid them on donkeys. And he said unto her young man, go on before me, behold, I come after you. But she told not her husband Nabal. And it was so that as she rode on her donkey and came down by the covert of the mountain, that, behold, David and his men came down toward her, and she met them. And David had said, surely in vain have I kept all that is this fellow hath in the wilderness, so that nothing was missed of all that pertained unto him, and he hath returned me evil for good. Gods do so unto the enemies of David, and more also, if I leave all that pertain to him by the morning light, so much as one man-child. So, look, David is so mad. He says, well, I'm going to go. I'm going to kill them all. All down to the very last one. Nobody's going to be left. I might as well. I shouldn't have done this. Now, listen. As a man, I have to be honest about this. Now, if you think about it, men, how many of us might have been in similar shoes? I would hate to think that I'd go, well, I'm going to kill all the people there. But, how many of us would have been offended and gone, are you kidding me? Look at all I've done for you. I kept your goods for you, and you're not going to pay me anything for that? You're not going to do anything for me? So many of us would probably feel the same way. But Abigail has come, and she's brought all these goods for David. And when you're reading this in the scripture, and if you just kind of read through it, you might miss it. But she has gone undercover. It says that the covert of the hill. She has gone down to where she's kind of sneaking in. She's kind of going underneath the hillside to where what happens if you're on a hill and people look up and they look up to the top of that hill? Well, they're going to see you. Well, if you come down beneath it, then people can't see you as well, right? And so she rides on and she kind of sneaks up upon David. And so Abigail is going to intercede. She's gotten the message. She goes to speak with David. All right, verses 23 through 31. When Abigail saw David, she hasted and alighted from her donkey and fell before David on her face and bowed herself to the ground. And she fell at his feet and said, Upon me, my Lord, upon me be the iniquity. And let thy handmaid, I pray thee, speak in thine ears, and hear thou the words of thy handmaid. Let not my Lord, I pray thee, regard this worthless fellow, even Nabal. So here, what does she even say about her husband? He is a worthless fellow. I've thought about, there are several of these in the Bible where you have a husband that is not a good husband. Sometimes you have a wife that's not a good wife. I mean, you think about that with Job. Satan takes everything from Job, but what does he leave? Leaves his wife, right? Now, I think that's saying something about her character at that moment, because later on, what does she do? Just curse God and die. So Satan knew what he was doing with her. Now, when you think about what's going on with Nabal, everybody knows that he's just a worthless human being. And that's what everybody says. Even his wife says this. And so anyway, she says that, Let not my Lord, I pray thee, regard this worthless fellow, even Nabal, for as his name is, so is he. Nabal is his name, and folly is with him. And so what does Abigail say? Even if, his name is means fool, and guess what he is? He is what his name is. There are people that they have names, and names have meaning. I mean, we've tried to be very thoughtful in how we named our children. We wanted to have good names for our children. As a matter of fact, and I hope I don't upset anybody here, we were looking at different names for Aletheia when we were having her, and Aletheia is the Greek word for truth, and so we like that one. But we were thinking about other names, maybe even a middle name, and we had heard Hayden. We go, isn't that a pretty name, Hayden? Isn't that a pretty name? Hayden means heathen, and we said, you know what? We're not going to raise a heathen, hopefully, so let's not name her heathen. And so we just didn't do that, And even with this last one with Tanner, people were coming over and we're trying to find a T name in the Bible, and people kept coming up with the different T names that they could think of, and different Greek T names, and so people had come up with Theophilus, which I like that. But everybody said you can call him Theo for short. Well, if you know what the Greek is, Theo is theos, and that means God. I'm not calling my kid God, okay? I've got a little bit of a hamper on that one. I can't do that. So that's just not going to happen. So we named him Tanner instead, But you think about, these names. Names mean something. And Nabal's name, he lives up to it, quite frankly. He is a fool, and his name means fool. And so it says, Nabal is his name, and folly is with him. But I, thy handmaid, saw not the young man of my Lord, whom thou didst send. Now therefore, my Lord, as Jehovah liveth, and as thy soul liveth, Seeing Jehovah hath withholden thee from blood guiltiness and from the avenging thyself with thine own hand. Now therefore let thine enemies and them that seek evil to my Lord be as Nabal. And so what is she saying here? Look, I've stopped you from blood guiltiness. I've stopped you from doing wrong. So she's stopped him from doing something wrong. And then and she says, and from avenging thyself with thine own hand. Now therefore let thine enemies and them that seek evil to my Lord be as Nabal. So anybody that wants to do harm to David, let them be as Nabal, let them be fools. All right, verse 27. And now this present which thy servant hath brought unto my Lord, let it be given unto the young men that follow my Lord. Forgive, I pray thee, the trespass of thy handmaid, for Jehovah will certainly make my Lord a sure house, because my Lord fighteth the battles of Jehovah, and evil shall not be found in thee all thy days. And though men be risen up to pursue thee, and to seek thy soul, here's something interesting that she brings up, and to seek thy soul, yet the soul of my Lord shall be bound in the bundle of life with Jehovah thy God, and the souls of thy enemies, them shall he sling out as from the hollow of a sling. Do you think that she knows what happened with Goliath? Do you think that she understands who David is? She says, listen, here's a nice little reference to that. Let them be as the empty hollow of a sling here. Verse 30. And it shall come to pass when Jehovah shall have done to my Lord according to all the good that he hath spoken concerning thee, and shall have appointed thee prince over Israel. So she knows that he is going to be king, right? That this shall be no grief unto thee, nor offense of heart unto my Lord, either that thou hast shed blood without cause, or that my Lord hath avenged himself. And when Jehovah shall have dealt with my Lord, then remember thy handmaid. And so she says, when Jehovah deals with Nabal, just remember me, okay? And so Abigail, she meets with David. All right, let's look at this. David then deals kindly with her in verses 32 through 35. And David said to Abigail, Blessed be Jehovah, the God of Israel, who sent thee this day to meet me. And blessed be thy discretion, and blessed be thou, that thou hast kept me this day from blood guiltiness, and from avenging myself with my own hand. And so he says, look, I was about to do something wrong, and thank you for stopping me. I will have to say that this is something that women tend to do very well. If you are married and you have a good wife, you can get real upset about something, and then your wife can come along, and she can kind of help you out, kind of calm you down a little bit. This is a good trait in women. Not all of them have it. Not all women have this, but many do. And so Abigail does have this kind of an effect on him. And verse 34. For in very deed, as Jehovah the God of Israel liveth, who hath withholden me from hurting thee, except that thou hadst hasted and come to me to meet me, surely there had not been left unto Nabal by the morning light as so much as one man-child. So David received of her hand that which she had brought him, and he said unto her, Go up in peace to thy house, see, I have hearkened to thy voice, and have accepted thy person. And so David calms down. He's not upset anymore. He's been given something, and she has softened this whole thing. Then verses 36 through 39, something kind of surprising happens in the scriptures. And Abigail came to Nabal, and behold, he held a feast in his house. Now, okay, stop just a second, okay? So she comes back after bringing all these things. Now, if you think that when you're reading through all the things that she brought, that she had quite a wealth of things, that's true. She did. I'm kind of wondering, what kind of a household they must have had to be able to have pretty much all that stuff on hand and to be able to go and take care of it. I mean, she wasn't there cooking all day and then going. She took that stuff immediately and took it to David. She went as fast as she could And so she had all these things prepared already, and she gifted them to David. Now, she gets back, and remember Nabal saying, "Look, I don't know who this son of Jesse is. I don't know who David is, and why should I give of my things to him?" Now, Nabal evidently has plenty to spare, because when Abigail gets back, he is right in the middle of feasting. And so, verse 36 again. And behold, he held a feast in his house, like the feast of a king. And Nabal's heart was merry within him, for he was very drunken. Therefore she told him nothing, less or more, until the morning light. So she's not going to tell about her visit with David. And it came to pass in the morning, when the wine was gone out of Nabal, that his wife told him these things, and his heart died within him, and he became as a stone. So basically, what it is like is it says his heart died in him. Well, he's still alive. He's still alive for several more days. The best thought process is probably that he just basically dies inside and is in a coma for the next several days. But anyway, he dies to himself. He becomes as a stone. It says, verse 38. And it came to pass about 10 days after that Jehovah smote Nabal, so that he died. And when David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, "Blessed be Jehovah that hath pleaded the cause of my reproach from the hand of Nabal, and hath kept back his servant from evil, and evil doing of Nabal hath Jehovah returned upon his own head." And David sent and spake concerning Abigail to take her to him to wife. And we're going to have some things to say here in just a moment about this. But so Nabal dies, and then David is praising God for it. He not for Nabal's death in particular, but that David has been avenged, and he didn't have to kill him. He was not, guilty of any wrongdoing from all of this. And so, all that being said, it ends with David sending his men to ask for Abigail to become his wife. There's a problem with this. What's the problem? The problem is, well, he already has a wife. Michal, Saul's daughter, is back in the kingdom, but is David's rightful wife. Now, there are people that want to make all sorts of excuses. Don't make excuses for this. I'm going to prove this in just a second, but hold on with me, because David doesn't stop here. Look at verses 40 and following. When the servants of David were come to Abigail to Carmel, they spake unto her, saying, "David hath sent us unto thee to take thee to him to wife." And she arose and bowed herself with her face to the earth, and said, "Behold, thy handmaid is a servant to wash the feet of the servants of my Lord." And Abigail hasted and arose and rode upon a donkey with 5 damsels of hers that followed her. And she went after the messengers of David and became his wife. David also took Ahinoam of Jezreel, and they became both of them his wives. Now Saul had given Michal, his daughter, David's wife, to Palti, the son of Laish, who was of Galem. Now, there's a lot going on in those few passages. But David has followed in some pretty bad footsteps here. Is David going to be a better king than Saul? Yes, absolutely he is. Is David going to be a perfect king? No. No, he is not. He is already disobeying one of God's commands. Now, if you look, matter of fact, we'll just turn there. Go to Deuteronomy chapter 17 with me. Deuteronomy chapter 17. Now, think about this. Moses wrote this years before there was ever going to be a king. Okay? Let's keep that in the context. God knew that there would be a king. And there was not a king yet, but God knew that there would be a day when there was a king. Now, I want to point out verse 18 first. It says, "And it shall be," this is the king, "and it shall be, when he sitteth upon the throne of his kingdom, that he shall write him a copy of this law in a book, out of that which is before the priests of the Levites, and it shall be with him, and he shall read therein all the days of his life, that he may learn to fear Jehovah his God, to keep all the words of this law and these statutes to do them. That his heart be not lifted up above his brethren, and that he turn not aside from the commandment to the right hand or to the left, to the end that he may prolong his days in his kingdom, he and his children in the midst of Israel. All right, so what's the king? So granted, remember this, Moses has written this years before they're going to have a king. And so, decades have gone by, here. And they're going to have a king, and what does he say? Well, okay, so the writing here is this. What is a king's first thing that he's supposed to do when he sits on the throne? Well, he's supposed to write the law down. Why? Well, he's supposed to know what's in the law. I mean, how are you going to be a good king if you don't know the law of God? I mean, we have terrible presidents because they don't know the law of God. They just don't. So this is the thing. If you're going to be a ruler of men and you're going to be a righteous ruler, you got to know what God's word says. A king would be involved in judging people at times, and so he would have to have the ability to judge, knowing then, therefore, the law. Okay, so all that being said, David is still not sitting on the throne yet, but before any of this is said, look at verse 17. It says, neither shall he multiply wives to himself, that his heart turn not away, neither shall he greatly multiply of himself silver and gold. And so what does David do? David starts a problem, because David marries multiple women, and then Solomon marries even more, right? I mean, I don't even know where to start on Solomon being the wisest man to ever walk the face of the planet, and then having all those women. I mean, I don't even understand. I can hardly please one. And so but he's got all these women, and I'm thinking, man, I don't even know where the wisdom is in that one. But David just starts a bad thing here. Now, does he maybe explicitly know this command? Maybe not, but he should have. Should he have known better, just in general? Yeah, absolutely, he should have known better, just in general. The concept for marriage throughout time has been one man and one woman for life. When you go back to the garden, how many wives did Adam get? Just the one. Now, there are men who do go above and beyond, and they shouldn't have. But David goes off on this. Now, when you think about all the things here, we've made some application along the way. David, of course, he was about to commit sin. He is saved from committing sin by Abigail. But then, he goes on to doing this other sin here. Instead of sinning against Abigail in the sense that he was going to kill her, he sins against Abigail, against God, by adding her to a harem, if you will. And so this is not good. This is not good. This is going to cause problems later on, and we're going to see that. But here's the thing. When you look at what happens with Nabal, none of it should have happened. None of it should have happened. Nabal was wrong, and then also who else was wrong? David was wrong. And so that's kind of the scenario that comes up so many times, is that we like to think that we're always right. And we get on to, and I can tell you that, this is what I was taught, so many times when trying to get a degree in counseling, is that when you think about a situation and you have one person upset with another person. And just think about a marriage. When a married couple is upset, is one side going to have all the truth? Likely not, right? Usually, if you listen to one side, you're going to go, okay. You listen to the other side, and you go, okay. And the truth ends up being somewhere in the middle of the two. Not that they're trying to lie, it's just that they have two different perspectives. Here, David is looking at this and going, I've been offended. And Nabal is looking at this and going, I don't want to spare anything. I don't know who you are. I don't care who you are. And both were wrong. And then David furthers that by taking on multiple wives. This is kind of a hard passage to think about because I think that probably many of us, even right now, are thinking, but David is a man after God's own heart, isn't he? How can a man after God's own heart do these things? And the reason is that a man after God's own heart still can sin, but a man after God's own heart is going to repent when he finds that he's done wrong. And there are times when he has to repent, and he repents hard. But right now, there's other issues about to come with David. You got to remember, David also, he's young at this time as well. He's not exceptionally old, probably, just, in his 20s still at this point. But David is growing, and he'll get to a point where he's a much wiser king. He's a better king, but he's got his own issues. And I think that when we look at life, we realize that too. As good as people are, we all have our own issues. We all have our own problems that we need to overcome, our own temptations, our own characteristics even that we've got to get over. And so that's what David has to do. And so now Nabal, of course, a foolish man, an evil man, a churlish man. But he does wrong to David. David almost does wrong to him. But we have somebody that cares about people, that intercedes. And you know what? I think about that and I think, we need to intercede for people too. Not that, we're looking at saving a person's life necessarily, but we need to be able to save people's souls. And how are we going to do that? If we're going to sit in a building and just listen to sermons, that's not going to get us there. What we need to do is we need to listen to these sermons. We need to go out and we need to teach others. And so we need to be interested in trying to intercede for people. If we can go and we can bring someone to the Lord and then they can become a Christian, we have saved someone from the error of their way. And so, brethren, if you're sitting here tonight thinking, you know what, I've not yet become a Christian, well, then you've got an opportunity right now. But I think as I look out, most everybody in here are Christians. Well, think about that. If you're a Christian and you have not been living right, you can make things right tonight. Don't let another minute go by. Come forward right now, please, as we stand and as we sing.